One.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. Today's topic of discussion is deconstructionism as it relates to literary theory. So, where do we begin? Deconstruction is a philosophy that comes from a lecture given at Johns Hopkins University in the 60s, I think so. Anyway, uh, the founder of deconstructionism is a French philosopher called Jacques Derrida. And Derrida himself was always elusive when people corner him and ask him to define deconstructionism. As you will see, it wasn't that Derrida was trying to be all elusive and all that, but comes from the nature of deconstructionism itself. So I thought that the very best way to explain deconstructionism is deconstruction. See, deconstructionism. I think that the best way is to go back to the very beginning, probably further than you think, like to the beginning of time, as it relates to the Western traditional thought. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. So you recognize that from the first verse of the Gospel according to John. Anyway, that's where Derrida starts. And it starts from this, what he describes as logocentrism. Logo comes from the Greek word logos, which is word. So there's this belief stemming from that, and we'll see it even in the Greeks' ideas of Plato. But I'll just stick to the Judeo-Christian tradition. What it basically says is like, in the beginning there was one constant, one eternal truth, and that this eternal truth, this constant, it had always been there. So it's like from then on, Western thought tends to think in terms of something, nothing, in terms of elemental opposites. So for Westerners, you think in terms of good, bad, good and evil, man, woman. So that brings us to a very important part. Binaries, opposites, elemental opposites. And that's how you describe deconstructionism. You start with binaries, opposites. So, good and evil, explain that. Man and woman. I'm recording this video on an iPhone, and the iPhone uses the iOS platform. So iOS, Android, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. Yeah, these two guys just love each other. No, just kidding. Good one. How could I forget? East Coast, West Coast. Here I'm referring to the rivalry in the 90s in hip-hop between Tupac and biggie. So all these are opposites. So don't mind that. That's just it's gonna start raining outside. I think it's thunderstorm and all that. Anyway, all these opposites. That's where we begin. But that's not what deconstruction is about. I thought a good example is if you've ever read the novel Dracula. I think that's where I found the best example to explain deconstructionism. There's an overriding theme of life and death, all opposites. It's like going back to the binary thing. Is normally Derrida is saying that when we think, if we are thinking about good, in our thoughts we will think not really good on its own, standing on its own, but in terms of evil. You'll think of good. If I ask you to define good, you'll probably think of it as the opposite of bad. If I ask you about bad, you'll probably think of it in terms of the opposite of good. So that's how minds are, like in this. Probably it's because of culture. Probably. Anyway, in Dracula, there's life and death, and these two are opposites. So what deconstruction is in, the whole point of all this from the beginning is that Derrida is saying, like, this is how we view life, this is our world view. But deconstructionism, pay attention, deconstructionism all leads to the removing of the boundaries. But so deconstructionism is about removing boundaries. So you have like this. In Dracula, the text kind of gives a very good example. Dead. So there's the example of one of the characters, Lucy Westrana, dies, and when she dies, she becomes a vampire, and a vampire in Bram Stoker's novel is explained as a creature that's undead. But what is undead? Is it life? Is it death? It's something that's like both. It's something that's like both life and death, because Lucy dies, and when she dies, she becomes undead. Yet when she's undead, the vampire hunters, Van Helsing, Jonathan Archer, not Mina, she didn't participate in that. Like all the men, they had to kill her in a form as the vampire. They had to kill her, and yet she's dead already. She's undead. They have to kill her so that she can gain eternal life, yet she's undead. So that's what deconstruction is all about. Another example, if you did not understand that, let's use something that's outside the Western tradition, but I hope we'll explain it. Yin and yang. Yin and yang. Yep, I think this is well, it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to explain a concept. Doesn't matter if it's right. Yin and yang. Anyway, so for the deconstruction, and if we had to use the undead example, they are about removing these boundaries, and then like you remain with this whole object here. I don't know how you describe it, but what deconstructionism is, it's about subtleties and about the whole elimination of of boundaries. Final example. In the history of deconstructionism itself, one of the earliest proponents after Derrida came out with a theory was a guy called Deman. Anyway, Deman immigrated from Europe to America. Anyway, in America was a successful professor and all that. Anyway, after he died, somebody was working on his PhD thesis, and he discovered several articles that Deman had published in a Belgian newspaper before coming to the States, and in the articles were pro-Nazi, and people were surprised because the man had never expressed Nazi sentiments before. Anyway, I thought people were surprised, but I just thought it explains well, because the man himself, it's like he's been deconstructed, because that's the nature of people. You cannot fit people into labels like good, bad, whatever. People are more complex than that. So deconstruction is really about life and its complexity. And yeah, that pretty much explains it. Thank you.